Happy Trump-aversary. Precisely 1 year ago, the good Lord blessed us with a Noahide deluge of leftist tears. We will look back on 365 days of Covfefe. Then, we will also talk about how Ed Gillespie lost 2 nights ago, and Senate candidate Roy Moore has been accused of dalliances with teenage girls decades ago. Not good, very bad. Republican pollster Kristen Soltis Anderson joins us in studio to run the numbers for 2018. Amber Athey and Roaming Millennial come on the panel of deplorables to talk Kevin Spacey's Stalinist purge and why Facebook wants you to send them naked pics. Why wouldn't they? Finally, the mailbag. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. Happy Trump-aversary, everyone. Now, before we get into all the good news, and then Kristen is going to tell us all the bad news, we have to celebrate some capitalism because consumer confidence is at an all-time high. The economy is doing really well, but in particular, our economy is doing very well because we have another sponsor. We have Stamps.com. Stamps.com is great. We're going to be talking about millennials later in the show. I am a millennial. That means 2 things. I need instant gratification, and I don't want to pay very much for it. I am melded, obviously, to my desk chair. I can't leave it. I don't ever leave it during the day. I just scream for Marshall to bring me things like coffee and Covfefe. And with Stamps.com, you can get whatever you could get at the post office. Literally anything you get there, you can get it from your desk. So, why would you still go to the post office and deal with their limited hours when you can get postage on demand with Stamps.com? So you can buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter or package using your own computer and printer. Unlike the post office, Stamps.com never closes. Me, I need at least 15 or 16 hours of sleep a night. That severely limits the amount of time that I can run errands, mail packages, send out blank books to all of my Democrat friends. So Stamps.com luckily doesn't close. You get postage whenever you need it, 24/7. It's really good, especially as a business solution. It is in the old days they used to have these gigantic machines that would always break, and you could print out your postage or stamp your postage through them, but they would break, they were clunky, they were expensive. No one wants that. This is the 21st century. Get with the 21st century, man. Right now, if you use, this is the real reason you have to support these guys. They gave me the promo code Covfefe, C-O-V-F-E-F-E. So right now, if you use my promo code Covfefe, C-O-V-F-E-F-E, on this wonderful anniversary, you'll get a special offer. You'll get a 4-week trial that includes postage and a digital scale. It's free stuff, guys. And the best thing of all is you'll get the enjoyment of typing in a promo code Covfefe. So go to Stamps.com. Before you do anything else, click on the radio microphone at the top of the homepage and type in, you guessed it, C-O-V-F-E-F-E. That's Stamps.com. Enter Covfefe. Never go to the post office again. That is just great. You got to give those guys some love. Okay, now it is the Trump-aversary, everyone. Happy day. 365 days of Covfefe is what we're talking about. How has he been doing? If you look at the Democrat press releases or the mainstream media reporting, but I repeat myself, then the country is in smoldering ruins. If you look at reality, not so much. Here is the real story. On the economic front, consumer confidence is at the highest level it's been in 17 years. Over 500,000 jobs have been created in the first 3 months in office. Furthermore, stock market has rallied since Trump, and it is the second biggest one since JFK was in office. Those destructive tariffs and trade wars that conservatives feared have not materialized. Tax reform awaits a congressional vote. So Congress Republicans, go and vote for it. On corruption, Trump imposed a 5-year ban on lobbying the government by former White House officials and a lifetime ban on lobbying for foreign governments by former White House officials. On the so-called social issues, Trump repealed the Obama mandate that forced states to fund Planned Parenthood. He reinstated the Mexico City policy that protects U.S. taxpayers from having to fund abortions overseas. Unlike his predecessor, Trump has refrained from refashioning the White House into a giant glowing rainbow to celebrate activist judges' abuse of the Constitution. Instead, quite the opposite of that, he's appointed Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, a marvelous originalist justice considered the second coming of Antonin Scalia, Scalia's old fishing buddy, albeit slightly thinner and less Italian. He's also appointed 12 other textualist judges to the lower courts and many others who await confirmation. How about immigration? On immigration, President Trump has added more ICE agents. He has expanded deportation priorities. He ended the immigrant advocacy program at the DOJ, signed an executive order directing the Justice Department to defund sanctuary cities, and as a result, the number of illegals crossing into the United States has dropped by at least 70%. On foreign policy, where we were promised that Donald Trump would recklessly plunge us into nuclear war, what has really happened? Well, he got some trade concessions out of China. He's convinced them to cooperate in wrangling North Korea. He very ably handled the Syrian chemical attack, which was a test of American credibility and resolve, and specifically a test that Barack Obama failed with his red line that was a pink line and then it was an invisible line. He also oversaw the return of American high school student Otto Warmbier from North Korea, which has added to that the tension in that conflict, but he did get the student home before he died. He dropped the Moab on ISIS, over which Syria just today declared victory over ISIS. He has approved the Keystone and Dakota Access pipelines. Barack Obama's North Korea strategy of strategic patience is over. Barack Obama's Middle East strategy of leading from behind, it's over. Donald Trump also pulled us out of the pointless virtue-signaling Paris Climate Accord that experts say would have no effect on the climate. Speaking of the environment, at the EPA, 25 rules have been overturned. 19 rollbacks are in progress, 8 are in limbo. $23 billion of regulations were slashed within the first 6 months of that presidency, while a net 13,000 new federal regulations have been added annually for the past 20 years. Under Donald Trump, the number of net new regulations is near zero. As the New York Times reported in May, quote, Trump discards Obama legacy, one rule at a time. This includes ending Barack Obama's disastrous so-called Clean Power Plan, which, as the Heritage Foundation explains, would have resulted in higher energy prices, fewer jobs, less growth, and it disproportionately hurt poor families, and it would have affected, you guessed it, zero environmental benefit. Most importantly, Donald Trump has cracked the patina of credibility that Democrat operatives masquerading as journalists once enjoyed, and sophisticated Republicans, those very nice Republicans with nice glasses like I have, that they once indulged. As a result, nearly 2/3 of Americans now recognize that mainstream media outlets shill for Democrats rather than present unbiased reporting. And Hollywood lies in rubble, as the preening moralizers who hold their countrymen in contempt are caught, literally, with their pants down. All in all, an unexpectedly very Covfefe year. And if you've enjoyed all of these improvements, the protection of your First and Second Amendments from the claws of Hillary Clinton's Supreme Court pick, less government, more freedom, and strength abroad, thank a Trump voter. I would also be remiss not to point out another anniversary. Tomorrow is the Marine Corps birthday. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, the Marines have been keeping us safe for 242 years. So thank you very much, and happy birthday. Now, in the news, Ed Gillespie lost in Virginia last night. The Alabama GOP nominee, Roy Moore, has just been accused of trying to pick up teenage girls 40 years ago. Not good. And we are joined by pollster Kristen Soltis Anderson for analysis on what the numbers look like for Republicans in 2018. Kristen, I have just been so exuberant. I've been so happy. It's been a very Covfefe year. Make me feel terrible. What is it looking like in 2018?
Oh, but I'm normally a cheerful person. But if you are on the right side of the aisle, there's a lot of data that suggests the next 12 months could be kind of ugly.
That's not good.
Look, Republicans have been feeling good because many of these special elections, since Trump has been become president, have broken our way, whether it's Jon Ossoff losing in Georgia and on and on. So Republicans had been feeling pretty good about things. But the big test came on Tuesday night. And in Virginia, you had in Ed Gillespie, a candidate who was trying to split the difference between being a fairly mild-mannered, nice, cheerful
been in DC forever,
guy,
nice
been in
guy.
DC forever, nice guy, trying to, as much as possible, kind of embrace a Trump message, a tough message on things like immigration, talking about law and order issues. You've got MS-13, that there are, over 1,000 MS-13 members in Northern Virginia, sort of talking about those issues. And I think in part because he barely won the primary. He was primaried by a man named Corey Stewart, who made a big issue out of keeping Confederate statues up. Now, in the exit polls in Virginia, a majority of Virginia voters who turned out said they do actually want to keep those Confederate statues up. but nonetheless, that was not their main voting issue. And so Ed Gillespie lost. He lost by more than what the polls suggested.
It was a big loss.
It was a big loss. And now there's the question of, does this have national implications? Now, I'm always hesitant to say, yes, it does have national implications, because, you know, whether it was that Georgia special election or a statewide in Virginia, there are local dynamics, there are individual candidates and their personalities. But I think the thing that should have folks worried is that Ed Gillespie's numbers looked pretty similar to what Donald Trump's numbers looked like, especially in some of those bellwether swing counties. Now, in a state that Trump won, that may be fine. That may be perfectly enough to win, but Virginia was not a state that Trump won. And so I think for Republicans that are in places that Donald Trump didn't win, they're going to be facing a really big challenge for those midterm elections.
Well, that's the question. A lot of people, myself sort of included, but I'll at least acknowledge that I'm doing it out of my defense of the Republican Party and Donald Trump. They'll say, well, Virginia's a blue state these days. It's been going blue for a long time. And there was a statistic going around that in the last 5 presidential administrations, the president lost Virginia and New Jersey governorships in the first year in office. I don't know how someone figured that out, but that's interesting statistic. Can we just write it off and say, well, it's a blue state, Gillespie's not a great candidate, he's a fine candidate, and, you know, being pretty good doesn't get you over the finish line? Or should we be worried that we're going to lose the House or something like that?
So I think it's, you should not think, oh, well, this is just a blue state going blue, because of the magnitude of the loss. If Ed Gillespie loses by 2 or 3 points, hey, it's a blue state, it happens, you tried your best. But it's the way in which he lost. Ed Gillespie actually did great in places like Southwest Virginia, places that Donald Trump did very well in. Ed Gillespie's numbers were up dramatically from when he was on a Virginia ballot 3 years ago. So there is a Trump coalition. There are voters that have embraced Ed Gillespie more now that he's gotten closer to a message that's Trump-like. But it's in Northern Virginia and even in the suburbs around Richmond. So not just that beltway, you know, these are all folks that work for the government. This is further south in Virginia, but nonetheless, it's more upscale suburbs. These are the types of places where Gillespie just got annihilated. And that's where a lot of these swing districts are across the country. If Republicans are struggling in middle to upper middle class suburbs around metropolitan areas, that makes the math for the midterms very tough.
Yeah, I come from one of the most debated, contested congressional districts in the country, New York 18 in the Hudson Valley. And yeah, they don't like Donald Trump there very much. Very hard to run on him. They're a Republican sort that wears these glasses and this kind of jacket, and they work at hedge funds and things like that. Now, you wrote a book called The Selfie Vote: Where Millennials Are Leading Americans and How Republicans Can Keep Up. I have a question. Where are millennials leading us, and how can we keep up?
So where millennials, I think, are leading America is by embracing a lot of changes that have other folks from other generations feeling anxious. So whether it's cultural change, with millennials having sort of more progressive views on things like what is the definition of a family, things like smoking pot, whether it's economics, with millennials, I think, being much more open to
communism.
Okay. I mean, there is data that suggests that a lot of millennials don't actually really know what the term socialism means. They think of Denmark. They think, well, that's fine. Maybe we could have that here. Technological change, things that older generations sort of balk at or think, why would we want to change X, Y, or Z? Millennials were very comfortable with it. So they
don't go to church, right? They don't.
They're just as likely to do things like pray daily, but they're more likely to say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, that sort of thing. So there are a variety of things where millennials are just abandoning institutions that their parents or grandparents' generation had embraced. And so that creates a tension when Republicans tend to do really well among voters who are married, who go to church, who are white, who live in areas that are not as dense population-wise. And you see that millennials are living in areas that are denser and more walkable, and they're structuring their families in different ways, and they're not going to church, and it's a very diverse generation. All of these demographic things come together to make it really hard for Republicans to have a message to the millennial generation without embracing diversity, without embracing different family structures, things like that. So it's created this tension, and in the book I try to give Republicans a way forward that tries to preserve conservative principles. I don't think the answer is Republicans should just become Democrats.
Democrat light or something.
Because young voters don't love the Democratic Party either. Republicans have in some ways been given a stay of execution all along, because while young voters liked Obama, they're not fans of the Democratic Party.
Right.
But so what are things that conservatives can do that are completely in line with our principles that match up with some of those values? How can we use technology to make government run more efficiently, make it smaller, make it do the few things that it's supposed to do really well so it can stop trying to do all of the other things it shouldn't be doing? Stuff like that. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities that Republicans have missed over the years that it frustrates me, because now we have the oldest millennials are in their mid-30s. It's too late to win them back. The data that scares me nowadays is not seeing Republicans lose voters 18 to 29, because Republicans have been losing that age group for a decade or more. It's now that we're losing voters in their 30s. Those millennials are getting older. Some of them are getting married. They're buying homes, they're paying taxes, but they're not becoming Republicans, and that should really concern the right.
Well, what you said reminds me of the title of your book, The Selfie Generation, because you hear this all the time. People say, well, I'm spiritual but not religious, which to me means I don't care what God wants, but I'm very interested in myself. So I do like the idea of me, you know, and that is depressing, but obviously there's a certain narcissism that typifies the generation. You might notice that I talk into a camera for a living every day of the week. The group that gives me hope is the next generation, Gen Z. From some of the studies that come out from them, it seems they go to church more, they're a little bit more conservative. Is there cause for hope?
I think there are some areas where you find Gen Z folks who embracing things like tough views on immigration, you know, being pretty being further to the right than their millennial older brothers and sisters are.
We shouldn't just let everyone come in and blow up our cities or something.
Well, there are a handful of
youth.
Views where, you know, Republican teenagers have pretty conservative views. There are issues, however, like gender identity, climate change, where they trend even more progressive than their millennial older brothers and sisters. But I think for Gen Z, their views have not been cemented. For the millennials, we either came of age right before or during the Obama presidency, and so for a whole variety of reasons, that has started to cement their views as being a little further to the left. But for Gen Z, that stuff is it's malleable. If you think of it like cement, when you first pour concrete, it's malleable. You can still write things in it. I think that's where Gen Z is now. And if Republicans and conservatives make an effort to actually say, here's why markets are good, here's why our values are good. Those are arguments that were never made to millennials, but there's still time.
But what about that immigration argument? If they're to the right on immigration, if they're to the right of what most Republicans were on immigration even 10 years ago, does that mean that we need to eschew Donald Trump and say this isn't what conservatism is? Or do we have to take a little bit of the Trump movement and the Trump election and say, yeah, maybe we should speak more bluntly about issues of legal and illegal immigration, national security, even possibly tax regimes and free trade?
Well, I think the other thing you have to keep in mind, though, is the diversity of these generations. So if you look at the baby boomer generation, I think 3 out of 4 are white non-Hispanic. And as you get further and further down into the generations, for millennials, I think we're about 56% white non-Hispanic. For Gen Z, it's about half. So it's the increasing diversity of America is showing up most prominently in these younger generations. So the question is, how do you have a message that says, look, it's important to have a secure border, and it shouldn't be considered wrong to say that doesn't sound like we want America where everybody looks. You know, you've got to find a way to have the argument for your policy that does not sound like you don't want America's changing diversity to happen.
Now, it's a hard argument for me to make, because these days, I guess I'd be okay in that America, but during the heat of the summer, I would be booted right across. I get very swarthy, that Sicilian skin starts glowing out. Okay, Kristen, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Kristen Soltis Anderson, and check out the book, The Selfie Vote, Where Millennials Are Leading America and How Republicans Can Keep Up. And we better keep up, because we need to win elections and keep the Covfefe coming. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Okay. We have got to bring on our panel. So before we bring on that panel, we I have to remind you about The Conversation. Be sure to tune in to watch our next episode of The Conversation, Tuesday, November 14th at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, featuring little old me, little old swarthy me. The Conversation will stream live on the Daily Wire website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel, and it will be free for everyone to watch. We are very generous. Conservatives give generously to charity, but only subscribers can ask questions, because we're capitalists too. I'm trying to teach lessons as we do this. Subscribe today to ask me all of the important questions and join the conversation. Now, you want to see Romy Millennial. You want to see Amber Athey. But I'm sorry to tell you, if you don't go to dailywire.com, you can't do it. So thank you to everyone who currently subscribes. You help us keep the lights on. To those who haven't, go to dailywire.com right now. What do you get? I know, come on, this is a monetary exchange. You get me, you get the Andrew Klavan Show, you get the Ben Shapiro Show, blah, 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 blah. Here it is. Guys, on the 1 year anniversary, do not be drowning. Do not allow yourself to drown in the deluge of leftist tears. Get the tumbler. You can put them in here however you want. Hot or cold, always salty and delicious. They're really, really good. Go to dailywire.com right now. We'll be right back.